Hi, I'm Alan Murray with Fortune, and I'm here with two of my favorite CEOs. Appreciate you both being here, Adena Friedman of Nasdaq and Aneel Bhusri of Workday. And we're going to have a conversation about the promise, but also some of the questions around the application of AI in industry and how it's changing business. And I want to ask you both first. I think everybody in business now understands that this set of technologies, we say AI, but we're really talking about a whole, sensors on everything, the ability to collect data, to make sense of that data, and then have it transform your business. It can affect everything you do, every company, every industry. The potential is well understood. But I've seen more recently a number of studies that say the gap between the potential and what people are actually doing is very, very large, and only a small percentage of companies are using it in the most effective way. Does that fit with your experience?
Yeah, I think AI is at its infancy, so people are starting to try to understand how to unlock the potential of it within the data sets. And I think also people are starting to realize that it does require very large data sets in order to be able to generate really truly predictive signals or different things that they can get out of the data. But there are some new technologies coming along that does allow you to take smaller data sets, extrapolate it out as if it were a large data set in order for you to find those results. But those are things that are just developing. So I would say that the technology itself is so early stage that people are having to figure it out as they're also trying to harness their data. So it's an early.
And what are the obstacles, Aneel? What's holding people back?
Well, first of all, I think we are in that trial and error phase, and we're just learning what to do with these new technologies. First, you need a problem that you really want to solve, because AI can be thrown at lots of data sets. You want to make sure it's a business problem that's really pressing, that gaining insight in that business problem is really helpful to the business. Then you need the right data, and then you need a lot of data. And trying to get those three together is not easy, but it's trial and error and say, okay, I have the right problem, but I don't have the right data, or I have a lot of data, but it's not really an important business problem. Getting those things in alignment is the trial and error phase we're in right now.
I think that's what I hear from people. They sort of dip their toe in the water, and it's not very successful or satisfying, and so they say, I don't quite get why I'm doing this.
Well, I think it's also, I agree, I think prioritizing the problems. And so for us, we have certain parts of our business where it's a high priority problem. So in our particular business, we provide the technology to the industry, both broker-dealers, exchanges, and regulators, to help them surveil the trading activity either in their markets or on their desks. That is a big data problem, right? So we collect a lot of data, which then becomes a good opportunity for us to use that data to think about how to apply AI. For the markets, where we actually have applied it for ourselves, then it's a matter of training an engine. And that training takes a lot of time. You're trying to train them to look for signals, to look for patterns, to look for anomalies in those patterns. And then you have to look at it and say, well, what did it learn? So it takes a lot of time. We've been at this now for like 18 months of just training the engine to make it so that we know we have something that is in fact predictable, that is consistent, that we can then use as a signal for us into our production system.
Give me an example of something that you've used AI to find out of that trading data.
Sure. So within our own market, we are trying to make the alerts that we have. So what our system does is it basically says, is the trading consistent with the rules? And are there certain types of behaviors that are coming into the markets that are clearly against the rules? And there are well-known patterns that we can establish, that we can try to find. But sometimes, some of the people out there try to do new things and try to take advantage of the systems in new ways. And it may take us a while to make sure that we can see that as a pattern. But AI can find it much faster. So we basically have trained the AI engine to look for the patterns and then look for things that are somewhat like those patterns and help draw out new ways that people are trying to manipulate the market. But you have to train it to understand it first, and then it can help you find and identify new things.
And so if you compare what the technology can do today to what your compliance people could do 2 or 3 years ago, how big is the difference?
Yeah, I think the difference is that number one, it can cut down on false positives. So it can really help you hone in on what really is truly manipulative.
Focus on the right ones.
So to focus on the right ones. It actually ends up giving the compliance analysts better data for them to analyze. But it's a machine and human interaction. So the second thing is that it's actually finding new patterns that might have taken us longer to identify with the human eye. It allows us to find it a lot faster. And then also, if there are new rules that come in, now we can train the engine around those new rules a lot faster than we could have done it with humans trying to figure it out.
I've been surprised, Aneel, that HR is one of the areas where there have been the most applications. I never thought of the HR department as being the leading edge of technology, but I guess I was wrong. Can you talk about why that's happening?
Well, so when you think about the data sets that we capture in HR and finance and procurement, which is the three areas that Workday covers, it falls into three buckets. There's anomaly detection, looking for anomalies in your business process, as Adena mentioned. There's intelligent automation, where the machine learns that you're doing the same process over and over again manually. Well, why not just automate that process? And then there are recommendations. And so in the world of HR, an area for recommendations would be career planning. The machine learning algorithms will look at all the data of folks that have had successful careers and have had a great career path, and then we'll look at an individual and recommend what is a good next career path move for you. And that's something that you could spend years trying to analyze the data as a human, and the machine can crank through it really quickly.
And is that working now?
It's working now.
Good recommendations?
It's in production for us now. The other area that we're about to go into production with is intelligent auditing, where you think about the audit process. If you could just have an audit be straightforward and only highlight the exceptions, and that raises the awareness to auditors and the internal audit team, saves a ton of time instead of having to go through every single deal or every single transaction and audit it. If the machine can learn over time for multiple audits and just highlight the exceptions, saves a ton of time.
Well, also, I actually would say audit coverage is a lot higher too.
Yep.
So if you think about what auditors do is they sample your financial results, and they sample certain inputs and outputs. But if you have a machine learning algorithm,
you can do it all.
They can do it all.
Yeah.
And then it does spit out the things for the auditors to actually pay attention to. But the audit coverage can be much, much higher.
So that's very interesting. So one of the places we're going to see the effects first is in compliance, safety, auditing, finding things that are going wrong faster and fixing them. There's been a lot of talk about the use of AI in screening candidates, pointing to most likely successes, that sort of thing.
I think that's still in the early days, because there's still a lot of human intervention in writing the algorithms and making sure that they don't have biases. What actually is a successful candidate? What was the success of the people who have been through this job before? So getting that right up front and making sure there are no biases is hard. And so I do see a lot of promise in that area, but we have to tread carefully.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about that, because you've been talking about. It's interesting that you think the first use cases are in areas of compliance, just making sure systems work better, safer, et cetera. But people do have misgivings about this. I mean, when they think somehow it's going to affect whether they get a job, or you have all this data about their history and they're worried about how you might use it. How do you deal with the trust problem?
Well, I'd say there's two things. First of all, it's recognizing what machines are good at and what humans are good at. There's a great book called Prediction Machines, written by three Toronto professors.
I've read that.
And it really focuses on what machines are good at, making predictions. They can't apply judgment, just makes a prediction. Humans are really good at applying judgment to that prediction to hopefully make a better decision. So if you believe in that framework, while the data is getting used, it's still a human at the end of the day making a decision if this is a good candidate or a bad candidate. And probably for the candidates going through the process, the data is being more accurately represented and used than it would be if humans are applying their own prediction to that data, that humans are not as good at predicting. So I do think that it's important to recognize the partnership between humans and machines. And the second piece is, if you're going to use AI, you need to have a code of ethics, and you need to make that very transparent to all of your employees. People know how their data is going to be used. They need to know how it's going to be used, and they need to have the opportunity to opt in. If they don't want to have their data used for a particular business process, they should have the opportunity not to do it. And every company that's using machine learning should get a chief ethics officer, if they don't have one, to navigate what is
That's a lot to ask.
world.
That's a lot to ask, because basically every company is going to, of any size, is going to be using machine learning. So you think every company now needs to have an ethics officer that's looking at how this is used.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about explainability, because of course the power of machine learning is you can put it to work on a data set, and it comes up with things you never would have thought of. You don't have to think of them in advance. But when it comes up with a finding or a correlation or a conclusion or a prediction, why is it important that you explain how it got there?
So clearly the first thing that's most obvious is unconscious bias. So if you think about it, humans are inherently biased individuals, but if the humans are teaching the machines, then you can inadvertently teach the machine to be biased as well, and biased, what I would call bias at scale.
If the data was based on biased decisions, then you're just building that into the algorithm.
Right, you are. And so at the end of the day, the machines are being built by humans. So you have to make sure that you're really focusing in on how can unconscious bias seep into an algorithm. And so the more explainable you have the algorithm. So what are the inputs? Kind of what is it learning, and what outputs is it generating? It allows you to have some transparency into whether or not there could be biases. So, I mean, the most obvious one that people hear about a lot, and this is using more personal data, is if you use zip code as one of your inputs and into a credit decision, then you basically are biasing the output. So I think you have to think about what are the unbiased ways to establish a credit history or a credit decision. And the one thing that I do think we need to work on with regulators, particularly in our space, is what is good enough? Because if we can't apply this technology out to the broker-dealer community, then they can't have the protective mechanisms to be able to make sure that they're staying ahead of any nefarious behavior that's happening. And I think that's the thing, is what's good enough, and we have to think about that.
Good enough in terms of explainability.
Because here's
what we're looking for. You want them to know what you're looking for, so they don't do it.
That's right. And then also deep learning is I mean, the machine learns. So the machine over time gets better at its job, and it changes. And so we have to make sure that we allow it to do that, because it's getting better.
So Aneel, you were talking about how the real power of this is to make predictions, and then the human beings come in and provide judgment. So you're really talking about a human plus machine equation. But that requires a lot of training, doesn't it?
If I were advising, and I say this half jokingly, but if I were advising kids going into college now what they should be studying, it would be applied math, maybe not computer science. There is a shortage of skills of folks that understand how to use it, but I think it's teachable. It's more math than programming oriented. What you're looking for are people that understand the underlying mathematics, who can also have a sense of a business process, so they can look at the data set and say, hey, what I see here means that my business is doing better in Japan than I thought. Here are all the leading indicators, and it would have taken me months to figure it out. The machine's spewing it out now. Well, what am I going to do with that prediction that if my business continues to be strong in Japan, maybe I want to put more salespeople there.
So you don't have to have the ability to build the code, but you have to understand the code well enough to know what it's telling you.
You need a small group that can build the algorithms, and a broader group that understands how those algorithms are applied and what you're trying to solve for. It always has to come back to an important business problem you're trying to solve for. And if you don't have that in mind up front, you're probably wasting your time.
So what we've done is we have a data science team that we can apply to any problem within Nasdaq. And we team them up with the business application team to build the algorithm, so that they know how to deal with the math, but the business and the business technology team, the application team, knows what problem we're trying to solve for. So if you only apply mathematicians to a problem, they'll find some really interesting things, but it may not be, or it just may not be applicable. It may not be that they're helping you solve the problem. So teaming them up also means that you don't have to have a giant mathematician team, but you do need to have a really good, I would call it a SWAT team, that you can apply to different problems, and then you bring the application team in to help you understand how to apply
These things are developing so fast. I mean, even 5 or 10 years ago, I don't remember people saying, hey, you should go to school and take data science. You didn't hear that much talk about data science. And people coming out of school have to continually upgrade their skills in order to be able to take advantage of it. How are you guys attacking that? How are the businesses you work with attacking that problem?
So we've actually been reskilling some of our engineers and developers. We've brought in data scientists from different schools and different organizations. We do internship programs, we do resident programs, but at the same time, we are reskilling members of our team if they show an interest. And there are programs out there. And I also would say it's going to get easier and easier, because that they're going to be more and more technologies out there that help solve this data science issue and make it easier for data scientists or people with math skills to be able to apply those math skills to data problems. And so I think it's going to propagate over time, but there still is definitely a shortage of people who have the really core data science skills to be able to apply to all the problems that exist in the world. But it is, we do a combination of bringing people in and reskilling.
Very similar for us. We have a core machine learning team that's really building the algorithms. And to Adena's point, from the cloud providers, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and IBM, they're increasingly opening up machine learning algorithms as part of their platforms, which is making it easier to get people onboarded and trained in some of the
how about with your clients? Because they're all facing the same problem you are, to reskilling, getting the skills they need to make this new sort of business work.
You know, they're all trying to do the same thing to varying degrees of success. I think for companies in financial services, they've been at this world for a long time. You know, fraud detection's been an important set of techniques for a long time.
Yeah.
For other industries, it's a newer muscle to develop, and they're going out, in some cases, acquiring small companies that have those skills or retraining some. But you gotta first have that core group somewhere, and then it's a lot of educating the business units what they might be able to do with machine learning and AI technologies.
People seem to be better at seeing the downsides of these things than seeing the upsides. Can both of you look, say, 10 years into the future and tell me what gets you really excited about this, where you see real value to business people, society coming out of it?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to think of what technology is going to exist in 10 years, because there's a lot of new technology coming out that can allow you to do all of this at even a higher scale. So first of all, more and more companies are getting their data in order. You know, getting data management capabilities that allow them cleaning and syncing and mapping so that you can draw more conclusions from your own data. So that's the first thing that I think will happen over the next 10 years that'll make a big difference. The second thing is obviously compute power is getting higher. I don't know if you want to call it quantum, but extremely, extremely advanced algorithmic capabilities with the ability to look at multiple scenarios, like thousands of scenarios simultaneously, comes into play. And then obviously cloud at scale. So if you think of all of those capabilities coming in, then you say, okay, what can you do with that? And for the markets, you can definitely think through the predictive capabilities that investors and others can use to predict the potential for a company to do well, the potential for a company not to do so well. So there's a lot more predictive, I would say, analytics that'll come into the markets on the investing side. And then I do believe that we will get even better at early detection and fast detection of problems in the markets to make it so that we can make the market safer.
10 years down the road, Aneel, what do you see that gets you super excited? You're a young man. You'll just be reaching your prime then.
This gray hair doesn't.
You got hair.
Well, so coming back to the partnership between humans and machines, I'm a big believer technology is neutral, is whether you use it for good or for bad. And machine learning is like every other new technology. You can be used for both good or nefarious purposes. Thinking about the good purposes, it's going to free up humans to apply their brains for judgment and decision making. And I think if businesses really embrace it, they'll get much better predictions out of their data. When they make a judgment against it, it should lead to a better business decision, which should lead to a better business outcome. You can apply that to a person's career too. They get a recommendation that they should take this next career step. They make a judgment against that. It hopefully leads to a better career path. So you can see all the positives from that combination of getting that initial prediction.
So decisions will still be made by humans, but they'll make better decisions because they have better information.
Better predictions. Yeah. That is the world, and that is the world if it works out the right way, and I believe it will. I think if you're a company today, you have to embrace it, because if you're not, your competitors are, and they'll have a significant advantage. So, time is of the essence. You've got to get comfortable with these new technologies. In my mind, every company in the world now is a technology company. They've got to use technology as an enabler for their business, and if they're not, they'll be left behind.
So let's get practical. I mean, what are the 3 best pieces of advice you can give to a business that's trying to figure out how to deal with AI?
I think the first thing is to understand what data they have in-house that they think that they can draw new conclusions from. The second thing is to figure out what problems they're really facing, problems or opportunities, let's say it that way, that they really want to try to use it. So how do they prioritize their problems or opportunities? And then look for the right, either if you're not going to build it yourself, look for the right partner, and make sure that you've got a partner who can help you execute against those problems and opportunities. And it could be that it's an embedded partner like Workday. So Workday is embedded in our infrastructure now. We have both Workday Financials and Workday HR. So now if they're building all these capabilities, we get to take advantage of it without having to figure it out ourselves. Right? So now it's a matter of, okay, now we need to partner with Workday to say, okay, what problems are we trying to solve and how can you help us? And the same with us. If we're helping the industry manage their trading surveillance, work with them, we partner with them, we have an advisory committee and other things to make sure we understand what are the biggest, highest priority problems within the industry, how do we help them solve it? So that they don't feel like they have to do it all themselves. And then for those things they can't find a good partner for, that's when they say, okay, now we're gonna need to have a SWAT team that's really focused on this issue.
I'd echo all that. I would add two things. She's already covered all the right things. You have to stay committed. You can't just try it, and if it doesn't work,
you can't dip your toe in and say, "Oh, it's cold."
You've got to be committed. You've got to have a team that's committed, and you have to have a trial and error mentality. And when you have a win, even if it's a small win, celebrate it. Show everybody within the company the benefit, and get people excited about it. Because it's easy for these new initiatives to die on the vine because they didn't have commitment. And if it didn't work the first time, they walk away from it. So you really got to stay committed to it.
Great advice, very useful. Thank you both. Good conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.